Hey guys, welcome back to my studio. I wanted to do a little bit more with the coil built pots and show you about scoring and slipping to make additions, and then how to refine and how to put on a handle. So let's get started. So this was the pot that I was working on last time on the 3 coil mug, and it sat out it didn't sit out overnight. I put it in plastic overnight. I've come back this morning. I've worked on a few pots, and this has been sitting out in my studio for about an hour now. It's a little bit cool to the touch, which tells me that a lot of water is evaporating, and it's now much stiffer. So when I try to push this, it's a little more firm. I can definitely, if you can watch, you can see this, I can actually push it. Like, I can definitely make it go in, okay? But it's not as soft as it was before. So this is important because I need to tell you a little bit about different stages of drying in clay. So there's the wet clay that you start with, like this coil. And then as it dries, it goes through stages which have names. The next stage, which is what this is soft leather hard. And the feel of it is just like what it sounds like. The idea is that it's a little bit flexible, but it's definitely easier to hold its shape. The next stage is hard leather hard. When it's hard leather hard, it's more like really, really stiff leather, obviously, or I like to think of it as like an apple. It's so firm, it's really hard to push, but if you push hard enough, it'll bruise, but it's not completely dry. The last stage is called bone dry. And when it's bone dry, you'll know because it'll actually change colors. So you can see the difference between this one and this one in terms of its color. This one is bone dry. Once a piece of clay is bone dry, it cannot be worked anymore. So even if you didn't finish, if it becomes bone dry, if you try to add more clay to it, even if you score and slip, even if you wet it first and score and slip, eventually that's going to form a crack. It's not going to adhere. So that's why I was so adamant about keeping things covered. Even after you finish your mug, I recommend you keep it covered and let it dry super slowly. It's going to be better for you to transport the pieces back to my garage when they're hard leather hard than when they're bone dry. So just keep that in mind. So we're going to keep trying to keep everything covered. Okay, so don't let it get bone dry. Once a piece is soft leather hard or harder, you can still add clay until it gets bone dry. You just have to score and slip each time. So in this mug, I'm going to show you what it would look like if I want to make it bigger. So if you need like the grande 20-ounce mug, then this is how you would do it. So this is the first 3 coils, and I just let this set until it was dry leather hard. You can use your nail for this, but I am going to use my handy dandy credit card fork, for lack of a better term. And this is scoring and slipping. So to score, I'm just going to mark up the top of this. And this goes, again, the reason I like this is just that it's really fast. And I want to mark it pretty good, deep, and make sure I sort of go in multiple directions. Okay, so that's all scored. Now I'm going to add slip. So this is the slip that I had from yesterday. It started to dry overnight, so I just put a little bit more water in it, and I'm using my brush. You can actually use your finger for this, which I oftentimes do. Just happen to have the brush handy. I already made a coil, so you wouldn't have to watch me do that. And then you just add this coil on just like every other coil, and you're just back going like you normally would. It's a little bit hard because there's water here. When you go to put this one on, sometimes it gets kind of messy, but that's okay. You don't have to worry about it. Like, it's slippery. It doesn't adhere quite as, at first, sometimes it gets a little bit slick, but just keep keep at it. Since the bottom part is a little bit stiffer, it'll take a little bit more pushing, so that's okay. All right, so there's the inside, and I'll do the outside. And almost there. Okay, so now this is ready to pinch this up and just keep going. So anytime you stop and let it get a little bit dry, you can start up again as long as it's not bone dry. Just score and slip. So anytime you're adding something onto clay that's dried a little bit, score and slip. And I'm going to set this one aside for now. But I want to show you, actually before I do that, I'll show you this one. So here is another mug that I started about the same time I started this one. This one I've started to do a little bit of refining on. I kind of like this with its bumpy texture, and I like that my fingerprints are all over it. So I'll probably actually leave this like this. I'll finish this part and then I'll put a handle on it, and I'll show you that one later. But just so you can kind of see some of the differences, this one I've started to refine a little bit more. A lot of that refining is just with my hands. Just keep pinching and pinching, and you can, if you have a low spot, sometimes you can pinch underneath and pinch it up. If it starts to get a little bit cracky, put a little fingers on your hand and rub it. Do that. Don't get it too wet. I don't put the water on the pot directly. I usually just use my finger and just take a little drop, and I'll do it on the lip here, and just run a little bit of water on that, and that can help you smooth it out. So after pinching it more and more, I smoothed it a little bit with water and a little bit with the popsicle stick. Right now I don't have my popsicle stick with me, but I have this sort of fancy upgraded version of a popsicle stick. And this is just rubbing, just like this. Now, right now it's still a little on the soft leather hard stage. I'll actually be able to refine this more when it gets hard leather hard. So I'll probably come back to it. This is not necessary, but if it just depends on how much you want to spend time with the pieces. But the thing is, there's certain things, the more refining you want to do, the more you want to wait, do a little bit at each stage of the process. So this one's in pretty good shape. I could refine this more, but I kind of like this. I also folded a little bit of the foot back up, which I'm just kind of interested in. I could do this a different way, but what I kind of like about this is that I like how it sits on the table, and I like the idea that glaze might collect in that little spot. So it might make a little bit of a different spot. So, okay, this one is ready for the handle. So let me move this out of the way. And let me show you at least one way to make a handle. There are tons of ways to make handles. There's no wrong way. I could actually just make a normal coil and flip it and stick it on there with scoring and slipping, and that would be great. That could work great. You can take just a chunk of clay and grab it and just like that, and have it stick out and stick it on there. Whatever you want to do. The handles are one of the ways where you can get a lot of personality into your piece. So be really creative about that. I'm just going to show you a very simple way right now that I think looks pretty good. So I've started a coil, and I started to roll it so that it's sort of like a carrot. So to do that, when I roll it more on this side. So I kind of start here, and then I roll down, and then I roll more and more and more until this side gets skinnier, okay? Now this is way too much for this, I know that. So I just want to get something started. If you get it in this sort of carrot shape, it'll start to taper, which means gravity is going to want to bend it into a nice curve. So now that I have this like this, I'm going to cut off a section, and I'm just going to cut it here. Save this, so I'll put this back in the bag. You can see this mug, this is maybe about the size of the mug, just slightly bigger, maybe. It doesn't matter. So in this case, I can choose if I want to make a 1-finger mug or a 2-finger mug, or something that I can put my whole hand in. So this is one that I can put my whole hand in. I'm making this is how I start a handle that looks kind of like that. The other great thing about making your own mugs is that not only get to choose how your handle looks, but you can make a handle that feels a lot better than the ones that are mostly made. Most of the handles that you find on mugs are really, really skinny. And when you put your finger in them, that means that the weight of all of the liquid is only in a very small area. I like to make handles that are a little bit wide, well, actually not a little bit, a lot wider. Sometimes 2 to 3 times wider than a sort of standard ubiquitous cylinder mug, because it just feels so much better in your hand. So a lot of people don't like one-fingered mugs. It's usually because they've only used those really skinny teacup versions. If you make a one-fingered mug with a wider strap, it's super comfortable. So in this case, probably a 2-fingered mug just based on this distance. I could do something down here. I don't know. We'll see. I'll just kind of start. So now that I have this like this, I'm going to pat it down a little bit just to flatten it a tiny bit. Okay, now I'm going to work that. I'm going to leave the top of this round. So I'm not going to touch that part, but working just a little bit below that, I'm going to pinch very, very lightly down the whole thing. And by doing it with 2 hands like this, I'm actually creating a small ridge in the middle. Now I can keep that as a decorative element, or I can get rid of it later, but I just want you to be aware that you're kind of, the way that you touch the clay and the kind of marks you make can be part of your design. Okay, now this has gotten a little bit longer. And now it's definitely starting to take on more of a flat strap look. So I'm going to actually put a tiny bit of water on my fingers and lay it on the board. I'm going to take my fingers and run across this strap. Just 1, 2, 3, 4. Flip it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so not a ton, just a little bit. The edges aren't sharp. The edges are still round. You see that ridge in the middle? Okay, ridge happens to be on both sides. Now, what I want to do is expand this part where it's going to attach. I'm going to attach it from the top like that. To expand it, I'm going to hold it like this. I tell my students usually you're going to spank your handle. So I'm just going to tap the top. What I'm looking for is for the top to expand out kind of like the head of a nail. That's going to give me lots of attachment room. Okay, and also it's going to mean that when it comes off the mug, it's not going to come out straight. It's going to taper into the handle, and that's both aesthetically pleasing and comfortable. Okay, so now I need to decide where the handle's going to go. So I'm going to say there's a little bit of a low spot here, and I'm going to use that low spot. So I'm going to stick it in the low spot, and then I'm going to need to score and slip. So back to my credit card and score all the parts that are going to touch. So I need to score on the pot. There's at the top and at the bottom. I'm also going to score this. I'm going to score this near the bottom. I can smooth out the parts that don't touch. So, okay, now I'm going to add slip. You could add slip to both parts. I usually just add it to one. So I'll put a little slip on this. And now, because this is getting a little bit harder, I can push on this without it wanting to bend too much. I'm still going to support it on the inside though. So I'm putting some fingers on the inside, and then I'm going to attach it. I'm going to actually try to keep this straight until I bend it. I'm going to try to bend it one time. If you keep bending it over and over and over again, trying to check your fit, it gets very weak, and sometimes it'll create a thin spot that'll break. Okay, so there is the top part of the handle is attached. Okay, now I'm going to actually just start by letting it fall, and then I'm just going to encourage that fall even further. And I'm going to find out where it touches the mug. I'm gonna look at it this way so I can see that it's straight. Okay, that looks great. And now I'm just gonna push this part in. Okay, so that's it. Now there's a little bit of extra here, so I'm gonna just take that off with my fingers. And there is my handle for my mug. I can actually, I can really start to play with it now. I can push up on it. I can make it go up first. This one was made the same way, except that I started by putting the skinny part on first and then flipped it over and then did the thick part at the bottom. And I also let this handle come up above with this idea that I can get my whole hand in here. But this is made exactly the same way. I can do the exact same thing to make a one-fingered handle or a bigger handle or whatever I want. Okay, now I'm just gonna let this set for a little bit. One final thing, when you do this, you wanna make it so that there's a little bit of extra room. Remember that the clay is gonna shrink when it fires. So if you make the hole here just big enough for your finger, when it comes out of the kiln, it'll be too small. You won't be able to get your finger in it. So leave yourself some wiggle room here in the middle. All right, there's some more refining that I would like to do to this handle, but just like the pot, my best bet now is to let it rest a little bit, and then I can come back and smooth it out. I can use some water, I can use a tool, I can smooth out these marks down here. If I try to move those now, the curve will get lost. So I'm gonna hang off on that. And that is handle making 101. So enjoy making some handles, put them on, let your pot rest, then try some handles. If you come up with some other unique handle ideas, share those ideas, that would be great. So have fun, see ya.